So we've all been taught that what we eat and how much exercise we do determines how thin we are and how healthy we are, right? Wrong. Whenever we weigh ourselves and the number on the scale has gone up, we're like, it's because I'm not eating right or exercising enough. But here's the thing. What we eat and how much we exercise really isn't that important to our health. So says the evidence.
What evidence says that exactly? It would be nice if you included that in your video, because it certainly is easy to find evidence that says obesity is unhealthy. For example, this small study here where they had the experimental group start from a healthy weight and increase their weight by just 7 pounds. After a 2-month period, they had a noticeable increase in blood pressure just from gaining a little bit of weight. Or there's this study on type 2 diabetes where 70% of the patients went into remission 2 years after weight loss surgery, like gastric bypass. That's a pretty high remission rate for something that this person basically said is incurable through changes in weight.
And the second thing that we have to appreciate is that health is a privilege that you're born into. It is not an achievement from losing weight by diet and exercise. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to explain that.
Good God, what aren't they going to attach the word privilege to? In the last Jubilee video I covered, we had a person say that obese people can't lose weight because they don't have time privilege like all of the thin privileged people do. And now we have health privilege. These people are just going to add the word privilege to everything to discredit anyone who works hard and is disciplined, just like they add ist and phobe to every word to call everyone bigots. Anyway, this is 44-year-old Dr. Asher Larmie. That's right, I said Dr. Asher Larmie. And it's not doctor as in PhD, it's doctor as in MD or medical doctor. Dr. Asher Larmie is a general practitioner who tells obese followers to not lose weight because it's dangerous.
If you're a yo-yo dieter, stop scrolling. Here's a fun fact for you. It takes 5 times the energy deficit to lose a kilogram of fat than it does to lose a kilogram of lean mass. Think about that for a moment. When you start a diet, your body starts to lose lean mass, that's water mass, muscle mass, etc., etc. Why? Because it requires far less of an energy deficit. So of course, that's the first thing that's going to go.
Based on what study? Also, pay attention because in a second, Dr. Asher is going to conflate loss of water with loss of muscle mass to make people think that every time they're losing a kilo of fat mass, they're losing 1 to 5 kilos of muscle mass, which is insane.
But then you'll get to a point where your body's like, we cannot afford to lose any more muscle. This is a disaster. And at that point in time, that's when you start losing fat mass.
Okay, this person literally knows nothing about weight loss and exercise. That makes sense, to be honest. But how much are you starving yourself if you're losing a deathly amount of muscle? Because it is possible to retain muscle mass while dieting. If it wasn't, lean bodybuilders wouldn't exist. Not to mention that it's also possible to gain muscle while you lose weight, especially if you are a beginner weightlifter, which probably describes everyone that Dr. Asher is talking to. Now, Asher Larmie, as a doctor, might not be a fan of showing evidence for literally any of the claims that she makes. However, if you want to retain as much muscle mass as possible, or possibly gain muscle mass while you're in a calorie deficit, then you need to eat an adequate amount of protein and maintain an exercise routine. This is like basic bro science that you learn on your first day of lifting.
Since it requires 5 times the calorie deficit, you'll notice that the weight loss plateaus. Eventually, you'll hit a point where you simply can't go any further. That's because your body has been panicking for the last few weeks and months and has got to the point where it said, no, no more, you cannot lose any more weight. And that's why you start regaining the weight again. It's just that simple. It's science. There's nothing you can do to stop it.
Actually, it's probably more like they gain the weight back because they're addicts and they're relapsing back into their old behaviors when they get tired of the diet. But also, again, what science? I mean, this is super unprofessional. I've watched a lot of Dr. Asher's content, and I've yet to see a study for any of the claims that she makes. Now, you may or may not agree with the studies that I have posted, but at least I've shown you something so that you have the opportunity to fact check and criticize my statements. As for our doctor friend here, From a professional standpoint, this is lying, and as a medical practitioner, she should know better. In research, never showing the source material of your claims is considered to be highly dishonest behavior, and in college, they will fail you for doing that. I bring this up because we live in an information-based society where right and wrong information makes a huge difference in whether a person will be successful or not. In fact, to randomly bring up politics, information is one of our biggest hedges against tyranny and abuse because abusive people love to restrict the flow of information. Because of how important good information is, I think the whole health privilege bit from Dr. Asher is ironic because she treats her audience like they're stupid by denying them the biggest privilege on the planet, which is information, and the evidence that her statements have been fact-checked and are accurate, because not making sure that you have information that is at least somewhat accurate is just going to lead you down a path of failure that could very well waste a number of important years of your life. Also in this case, it could lead you into a whole slew of health problems that you could have prevented if you had the right knowledge. Let's get more into it, but first, let me talk to you about this video's sponsor, Raycon. Raycon sells premium quality wireless earbuds at an affordable price that come in all kinds of colors with a crazy long battery life of 32 hours and features such as active noise cancellation for loud public spaces and airplanes. Not only that, but Raycon's everyday earbuds also allow you to connect to two devices at the same time, so if you're watching a video on your laptop and you need to answer a phone call, you can do so seamlessly without having to mess with your Bluetooth settings. Now, I always forget to charge my earbuds before my workout, so my favorite new feature on the Raycon everyday earbuds is the quick charge feature that gives you an hour and a half of battery life after just 10 minutes of charging. Not to mention that Raycon's control features are top tier. With just a tap or a hold, you can pause music, skip to the next video, and change the volume. Last, the everyday earbuds are sweat and water resistant, so if you sweat a lot while you work out or accidentally run them through the washer, they'll be fine. Now, in addition to Raycon's already low prices, for Black Friday and Cyber Monday, they'll be offering up to 30% off site-wide. So if you want to save big, go to buyraycon.com/TBYS or click on the link in the description for up to 30% off site-wide. All right, back to what I was saying about how important information accuracy is and how much of a negative effect the wrong information can have on a person. Shockingly, Dr. Asher didn't always say stuff like this.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting topic, isn't it? This idea that weight loss is a good thing. Actually, most of the evidence out there shows that weight loss is actually not good for our health. In fact, if you want to pretty much guarantee that you're going to be heavier 5 years from now, the best thing that you can do is go on a diet, because that's actually the greatest predictor of weight gain, is going on a diet. The weight loss industry is going to try and convince you that I'm wrong, because they don't want to acknowledge the fact that actually most people, when they go on a diet, actually end up gaining weight over 5 years.
That has to be one of the most dishonest interpretations of statistics that I've ever heard. Saying that dieting causes weight gain because a bunch of food addicts didn't get proper treatment for their eating disorder. How do you know that those people wouldn't have gotten to that weight anyway or even gained more weight? Is there a study that tests weight gain after 5 years with dieters versus non-dieters? But as I said, this wasn't always the narrative that Dr. Asher promoted. In fact, just a little while before that clip, she was openly talking about how she wanted to lose weight.
About a month ago, I started trying to lose weight. I am on a mission to lose 40 kilograms in the next year. I believe in weight loss the hard way. I don't think it's meant to be easy, because I don't think anything worth doing ever is.
That clip was brought to you by the courtesy of a video from 2 years ago, made by a YouTuber with a last name that I couldn't figure out how to pronounce. Sorry, Kiana. But a ton of the older videos of Dr. Asher Larmie have been deleted. Judging by this post from her Instagram, I imagine that these videos were deleted because her old accounts were banned. But isn't it so weird that she formerly was pretty actively trying to lose weight, and not just out of vanity, but more specifically because she said that being obese is bad for your health.
Obesity is a problem for a lot of reasons. Obesity predisposes you to diabetes, it predisposes you to heart disease, it predisposes you to cancer, it predisposes you to arthritis. I could go on, but you get the picture. The most effective, safe, and healthy way for people to lose weight is to eat less and exercise more. If you eat less, you exercise more, you will lose weight. So I need to do whatever I can to minimize my risk. And because I am so overweight, I am far more likely to die of complications from COVID as people with a normal weight. And so COVID has done for me a lot of things, but one of the things it's made me do is stop and think about what I'm doing to myself and forcing me to take action.
On top of this, Dr. Asher stated in an article that her goal was to become a world-famous weight loss doctor. So how did we get such a radical shift where she not only quits her weight loss journey, but completely 180s to denounce everything she's been taught and has preached for the past 15 plus years as a med student and as a doctor? Well, fortunately, she actually addresses that in this interview here. Here's Dr. Asher talking about her mental state during her last diet.
And then I had to remind myself, but I tried and I tried and I tried and I tried and I tried, and it made me really miserable. I mean, it brought me to the place of deep depression, of suicidal ideation, of actual failed attempts at unaliving myself.
I've said it before in other videos, and I'll say it again in this one. A ton of people become obese because their addiction to food is actually keeping them alive. A lot of people engage in addiction because it numbs their depressive thoughts. In the most technical sense, they're doing it because they have a life-threatening illness called chronic depression, and the addiction acts as a treatment for that. So when Dr. Asher began dieting, her coping mechanism for suicidal thoughts went away, and I'm guessing that she didn't seek out professional treatment for it, so she got overwhelmed by the depression. Also, I cannot stress this enough. Obese people, especially ones that are Dr. Asher's size, are food addicts. There's even more proof that Dr. Asher is suffering from food addiction, as she describes having using dreams when she went on her diet.
A friend of mine told me the other day that she keeps dreaming about food. And I was like, oh my gosh, I do that too. I definitely did it right at the beginning when I first started on this journey of weight loss. I was totally dreaming about food all the time. And you know how you wake up and you think that your dream is real, and then you realize it's not real, and then you're just like, oh man, I could have really done with that burger. That's that's where I'm at the moment.
From everything I've seen in my research on her, I'm guessing that Dr. Asher knows absolutely nothing about addiction, because using dreams are very common when people suffer with things like drug and alcohol abuse when they try to get sober. Basically, your brain will have you dream about breaking your sobriety over and over, which can be quite distressful for recently sober people, as they might spend multiple nights a week dreaming about being drug addicts again. Fortunately, these tend to go away after prolonged sobriety, but the point is that basically Dr. Asher wants to lose weight, but she can't because she's not treating the addiction.
I have tried every diet known to man. And by diet, I mean I've tried calorie restriction. I've tried cutting out carbs. I've had that gym membership. I've done all the things that I'm supposed to do. And I'm desperate to lose weight. And it's still not working.
Yeah, it's not working because you need to treat the addiction, which would involve something around figuring out different coping mechanisms for the suicidal thoughts and discovering things in your life that are making your mental health worse, like debt or bad family relationships, and working to resolve those issues so that you don't have to binge on chocolate because you had a bad argument with your husband or because your kids aren't listening to you. Then you need some sort of positive relationship with a friend or a therapist or a community like 12-Step to speak with about the addiction, as well as reading really good books like Atomic Habits so that you can learn how to develop behaviors that prevent you from constantly wanting to eat. That is how you actually lose weight if you keep failing on your diets and can't maintain a calorie deficit. Anyway, I still haven't fully addressed why Dr. Asher changed. During the time that she was on her last weight loss journey, she couldn't use food to cope, so she went through a very depressive phase, and during that very vulnerable moment, she was approached by fat activists like Aubrey Gordon, Jessamine Stanley, and Reagan Chastain.
One of the people that you really need to talk to is Reagan Chastain. She works over in the States, and she is where I get a lot of my, she's the one that shares the studies with me.
Reagan Chastain is your source for data? You mean the girl who told everyone she was a triathlete who was going to do an Ironman, but had to cheat to finish a 5K? Aubrey Gordon is that woman that I covered during the Illymation drama. She's a fat activist who runs a health topics podcast, despite having no background in health or biological sciences, and despite having no idea how to read research. And she made this documentary where she lies to people about how healthy she eats. Then you have Jessamine Stanley. If you don't remember her, she's from the Cosmo magazine cover that says, "This is healthy." She's also pretty openly racist. I just thought I would mention that. Now, remember that video that I did on Jessamine Stanley called "This is a Cult"? Well, these activists certainly aren't beating the cult allegations with this one. These are literal cult tactics. They took advantage of a person who was severely depressed and indoctrinated her into believing an ideology that is not only based on no research, but actually runs counter to a mountain of evidence saying that obesity is bad for you. Asher Larmie went from talking about trying to lose weight to talking about privilege and bringing up the wage gap like a decade after it became a dead narrative.
The fact that, statistically speaking, there is, for example, a wage gap, and there's proper evidence that fat people are far less likely to be employed, promoted, and all of these things.
Are they ever going to shut up about this? Nobody is forcing you to be fat. You can just lose the weight if you think it's costing you money. Unlike your skin color, you can change your weight. And let's be clear, we have yet to see this person, Dr. Asher Larmie, show any data of her claims, so I'm not sure what research Regan Chastain is sharing with her that caused her to say this.
I think it's very obvious that people who have a completely different lifestyle to me are going to have very different body composition to me. But it's because they have a different lifestyle to me, and I can't change my lifestyle.
Okay, so Asher has completely given up. Anyone can change their lifestyle. So it's not that you can't change it, it's that you don't want to change it. And right after this, she promotes a hedonistic lifestyle that will most certainly make people unhappy.
Society tells you your blood pressure, your cholesterol, these are things you need to prioritize. Whereas I would argue, I mean, maybe you might want to spend what little time, energy, and reserves you have on having fun and going out and having a blast. Will that make you thinner? Definitely not. But will it improve your overall health? Maybe, because it might be helping your mental and emotional and social health.
Sure, that will make you happy in the moment, but in the long term, not only will you have a shorter lifespan, but your quality of life as you age will get much worse than a fit person's, as you have difficulty doing simple things like walking up a flight of stairs, or when you get osteoarthritis, or when you get heart disease, or diabetes. Actually, guess who now has diabetes?
One of the horrible things that's happened to me after my type 2 diagnosis is the impact it had on my relationship with food and movement. And it's taken me a really long time to realise that I can still eat intuitively and manage my type 2 diabetes. But that's not easy when people are trying to give you drugs that suppress your appetite, or people are telling you that what you eat absolutely controls your blood sugar levels. But I got there, and I want that for you too.
Holy crap, that was bad advice. I mean, she's full on into the I don't give a shit about my health mindset.
Not only have I chosen to remain fat and happy instead of thin and miserable, but I also don't care if it puts me at high risk of heart disease and diabetes. I'd actually rather get diabetes than be miserable. Can you believe it? My body, my choice.
So thanks to the likes of Regan Chastain, Jessamine Stanley, and Aubrey Gordon, instead of taking care of her health, Dr. Asher has decided to give up and get a very severe illness called diabetes that puts you at risk for a ton of other health issues. Or alternatively, Asher was tired of being a real doctor, got burnt out, and these people taught her how to grift.
I went into medicine to help people. It wasn't for the status. It wasn't because my parents were doctors. It wasn't for any other reason other than I really wanted to help people. And the moment I realized I lack the ability to feel any compassion anymore, I'm listening and all I'm thinking is, how do I get through this to the next patient? I realized it wasn't safe to be around patients, because that's not what you want from a doctor. You don't want your doctor to not care. And so I took myself away, and I've been off with Burnout now for over 2 years and have been doing a bit of activism. And, this is how I've got into medical weight stigma and all of the sort of, education and activism that I'm doing.
Yeah, so I wouldn't put this being an intentional grift past Dr. Asher. Lots of internet personalities are immoral assholes, especially activists.
Being an activist is totally gay.
I mean, if it wasn't a grift, she would be way more transparent about where she sources her data so people can criticize it. But of course, she doesn't do that because it would lead to people being able to point out numerous flaws in her source material. So instead, she's preying on people who are ideologically possessed or don't have critical thinking skills.
This is not a reasonable person that you can explain anything to them. You can't go and just tell them, oh, this isn't true because of this reason. This person doesn't think logically. They don't arrive at facts based off of evidence. They make their opinion up before they see what happens, and then they look for evidence to reinforce their opinion.
So I got really curious and tried to give Dr. Asher the benefit of the doubt with extreme amounts of generosity. I noticed that she has a website where she sells paywalled masterclass courses. Now, as a creator, I thought, well, her Instagram content is garbage and devoid of any useful information, so I know this paywalled content is going to be a complete waste of money. But then I thought about this situation as a viewer, and as a viewer, I would want to see what's behind that paywall. So for the sake of the viewer, I wasted about $150 American on Dr. Asher Larmie's overpriced masterclasses and spent multiple hours watching them. Here's what I found. This is a class I watched about high blood pressure, and holy shit, after 3 days of researching this person, we finally have a study to look at. On screen, we can see these pretty big decreases in blood pressure in the experimental group compared to the control group. Just a little refresher for people who don't read a lot of research. The control group is the group that does not receive the intervention being given in the study, and the experimental group does. In this study, we have 3 different interventions. One group changed their diet, one group did an exercise routine, and one group did diet and exercise. Blood pressure is separated into systolic pressure, which is the number that you see on the top, and diastolic pressure, which is the number that you see on the bottom. Without getting too much into the details, the standard good blood pressure is roughly 120/80 millimeters of mercury. High blood pressure is going to be like 140/90. Now, when we look at the diet and exercise group, we can see that people lowered their systolic blood pressure by as much as 20 millimeters of mercury, which is a huge deal. You can also see that in the systolic blood pressure category, they had a p-value that was much lower than 0.05, so it's statistically significant, which means that the numbers they got in this part of the study are unlikely to be due to random chance. So with all that being the case, how can you say that diet and exercise don't have a positive impact on your health? That seems like a borderline insane claim based on the data that you've shown. Well, Dr. Asher's whole claim on why diet and exercise don't improve your health is because this study showed that the improvements were not maintained over time. And so you can see that the chart at the bottom shows that at 12 months, basically every group lost ground, and the systolic blood pressure data was no longer statistically significant. Now, you would think that Dr. Asher, as a seeker of truth, would deep dive into the methodology or use some sort of critical thinking skills to say why the results at 12 months were worse than the first 6 months. Nope, she just said it's because diet and exercise don't work and can't fix your health.
As a doctor, I don't have time to read through a 100-page bit of information, right? I'm looking at the front sheet, the summary, the bullet points, the bits in the boxes, like any other person. I am looking at the bite-sized version, the social media version almost. And sometimes, actually, I hate to say it, but sometimes it is the social media version. Sometimes it is the tweet about the study that I read because I don't have time to go and read the study. There are hundreds of studies. Who has time to read them all?
Yeah, I can tell that you're basing a lot of your info on tweets about a study instead of an actual study, because during interviews, you can't readily cite where your information comes from. And I mean, how lazy is this shit? Most studies are nowhere near 100 pages, and most of the studies that I read for this video took about 30 minutes each to read. Not to mention that during the time of that last clip and the masterclass, Dr. Asher describes herself as a stay-at-home doctor, which means she should have more than enough time to read the full text of the studies herself. But don't worry, because I'm not lazy and I actually read the study, and I have to say that the most likely answer for why a lot of the participants didn't maintain their 6-month results is because they fell off the program. You can see on this chart here that they regained weight. So the failure is not because weight loss doesn't make you healthier, it is instead an issue of motivation and discipline. There are more things about this study that I want to talk about, but I'd rather move on instead of spending 15 minutes on this one thing. However, it is uncanny how a medical doctor who is charging people for this information would go straight into confirmation bias, only choose an interpretation of this study that's in her favor, and discuss no other blatantly obvious possibilities.
You have to understand how people behave. And you have to understand what people think. Yes, once you understand that most of people's opinions that they have are to make themselves feel better, not necessarily, or to reaffirm a worldview that makes them be the person who they want to be. Once you understand that, it's much easier to understand everything else.
The rest of this talk was an uneventful waste of time. Oh look, this class is so boring that they had to give you an achievement for finishing it. Now before we get into the next masterclass, I do want to point out that a ton of Asher's narrative is based on what she calls weight cycling. I'll just let her explain it.
When you lose weight, chances are you're going to regain it. Up to two-thirds of people actually end up heavier than when they first started. But whether or not you end up heavier or whatever, you're restoring the weight. So what's happening is your weight is fluctuating. And we call this weight cycling. We know from studies that weight cycling increases blood pressure. We know that weight cycling damages your heart in the long term and your circulatory system. And we know that the more you weight cycle, the larger the weight cycle, the greater the negative impact on the cardiovascular system.
So not only does it not improve the health of an obese person when they try to lose weight, but she's also saying that if you successfully lose the weight but then fail to keep it off, then trying to diet again will damage your health, and damage it significantly enough to outweigh the negative effects of being a morbidly obese person. So this is a pretty big claim. Now surely if Dr. Asher was going to say that trying to lose weight, failing, and then trying again causes heart disease, she would have some data to back that claim up, right? Nope. So this means that not only is she telling people that obesity does not harm your health, which is not true, she's also telling people that trying to get healthy will severely damage your cardiovascular system, as well as a number of other things, because this weight cycling narrative is something that she regularly repeats and has not once provided evidence for, which is borderline criminally dishonest behavior for a doctor. She should be citing her sources basically all the time, particularly if she had the time to make a PowerPoint slide for her claims. Alright, the next course is on type 2 diabetes. Oh wait, it looks like you have to look at a disclaimer before you can take the class. It says, fat is a neutral word that describes higher weight individuals. For fuck's sake, 8 syllables to substitute for a 1-syllable word. George Carlin is rolling in his grave right now with how long this euphemism is for fat people. Moving on, BMI is a racist and inaccurate measure of health that has been used as a tool of oppression over the fat community for decades. Okay, just say that everyone finds you annoying at parties. That would have been fewer words. Anyway, I'm going to ignore everything else and click continue. Getting into the video, let's talk about what causes diabetes. I'm sure that we won't see any totally insane claims during this presentation. How about we look at this slide here? It says that chronic stress causes type 2 diabetes. Fat stigma often generates chronic stress. You've got to be fucking kidding me. In this slide she wrote up, she's saying that telling people to lose weight and systemic judgment of obese people causes them to develop diabetes. I facepalmed so hard after reading that I almost gave myself brain damage. In this next slide, she talks about a study that she uses to claim that weight loss has no effect on type 2 diabetes because participants weren't able to maintain long-term results. So this is missing some context. Dr. Asher doesn't link the source for this, but I believe I found the study anyway. Basically what they did was put participants on an 800 calorie per day shake diet for a few months, which is great because 800 calories is a starvation/crash diet. Crash dieting tends to have terrible success long-term, so that's problem number one. The study doesn't have a sustainable weight loss model, and they picked a model that's so rigorous that participants are likely to give up or cheat. And it looks like they did do that because only a handful of them lost 15 kilograms or more, when basically all of them should have lost that with a calorie deficit that high. Anyway, after the shake diet, they got the subjects used to eating solid foods again for a few weeks and had them go on a maintenance phase for the rest of the study. Now, looking at these charts, you can literally see the odds of type 2 diabetes remission rates going up the more people lose weight, with people who lost 15 kilograms or more having a remission rate of 86% at 1 year, which dropped to 70% at 2 years. And if you look at this chart here, you can see that everyone regained weight after 2 years. So what a shock their remission rates went down during that time period. They gained the weight back. I don't see how Dr. Asher could say that obesity is not causing this problem after looking at this study. But wait, technically that wasn't her argument. Her argument was that saying that obesity is the cause of type 2 diabetes is pointless because people can't maintain the weight loss long term. Well, let's see what the long-term interventions were. Spoilers, they weren't that great. If participants gained back more than 4 kg or 9 pounds during the maintenance phase, they were offered to go back on the shake diet for 1 month with the option to take a weight loss drug. And if they wanted, they could go see a dietitian once a month for 30 minutes. So basically, in terms of addiction, their solution to long-term maintenance was another detox period, which in terms of sobriety is the easy part. The hard part is staying away from the addictive substance for a long period of time or forever. So they offered them another detox period, followed by offering them an appointment where a dietitian tells them to not eat chocolate. That's not going to work. They already know that candy bars are bad for them. You need to actually treat them for addiction or they're just going to keep relapsing and gaining the weight back, which, like I said before, means you teach them behavior modification tactics from books like Atomic Habits and also help them build a community and relationships with people who they can talk to about their addiction like 12-Step does. And if you're 50 to 100 pounds or more overweight, maybe go on a program that's not a crash diet. Maybe instead, do a 300 to 500 calorie daily deficit mixed with exercise for a 3-month period, followed by a 1 to 2 month break period where you just practice maintaining your weight. Ideally, you lose about 15 to 25 pounds per diet phase, so if you gain a pound or two back during your maintenance phase, it's not that big of a deal because you can easily lose that when you go back on your diet and still be losing weight overall. You should pretty easily be able to lose 50 pounds or more on this diet per year. Yes, that means it will take a long time if you have like 150 to 200 pounds to lose. However, if you crash diet, it'll take even longer because you'll keep having to start over. Or worse, you'll give up and stop trying because you aren't making any progress. But more importantly, what this study certainly does not give evidence for is Asher's claim that being obese does not negatively affect your health. It clearly shows that it does harm your health. Anyway, the rest of this video was pretty unhelpful. The sum of Asher's advice was basically lower your stress and don't check your blood sugar after every meal because the testing companies are just trying to scam you out of money. She didn't really give much advice on managing blood sugars at all. How are you a doctor when your presentation contains such low information density when it comes to things that are useful to people who aren't educated in your field? Wait, oh no, what's this? Apparently a woman named Deanne Jade filed a complaint to the General Medical Council against Asher Larmie. It quotes Asher saying, "I don't give a shit for my medical license and will put it up for sale on eBay." Followed by Deanne saying, "I'm sorry that this is anecdotal and I have no screenshot because I'm blocked. Someone tell this boomer to get a second account like everyone else." Deanne goes on to say that Asher is a poor representative of general practitioners and cites the interview that I showed earlier where Asher talks about health privilege. So this kind of sounds bad for our friend Asher Larmie. In a follow-up email, it says that the General Medical Council have agreed to submit Asher for a review and agree that her behavior is serious and undermines public confidence in the medical profession. Then let's see, we have some racist social media posts. One of them says, "My dog gets anxious around white people, and so do I." And, "If you're a cis-het white man, that is, I dislike your species as a general rule, and you gotta work real damn hard to get into my good books." Okay, that was pretty bigoted. The next message says that Asher got a warning on her license. After that, Asher proceeds to rage quit the medical industry instead of dealing with the warning and says, "Now I'm free to practice the kind of healing that I was born to practice, to be my authentic self without fear of the repercussions, and to continue to speak for those who are oppressed." I kind of doubt that this was a big mic drop moment for Asher, because in this interview here, she said that she was already checking out as a doctor anyway and didn't care about her patients because it was too much work. Now, personally, in terms of her license, I couldn't care less about the racist, sexist, and cisphobic tweets. I mean, I'm not going to be your patient if you're saying things like that, but I believe in free speech, so I don't think merely saying offensive things on the internet should remove your ability to legally practice your profession, provided that you aren't hurting anybody. But when a doctor does something along the lines of recommending that all of her patients binge drink alcohol to improve their health, which effectively is what Asher has done by telling people to not restrict their eating, it's not okay. And on top of that, with no evidence provided, she says that not only does being fat not cause health problems, but chronic stress from mean comments and things like restricting calories will give you diabetes, and making multiple attempts to lose weight causes heart disease. Because of these actions, I think she should absolutely lose her license to treat patients. I'm also concerned when Asher says stuff like this.
Black Lives Matter was a classic example. A lot of people went, well, why do Black Lives Matter and not other lives matter as well? Because we have to swing in the other way just to sort of bring us into the middle eventually. Like for justice and equity and all of these things to happen, sometimes we have to go in the absolute opposite direction. And I think sometimes I say things that may seem almost too extreme. And you know, people will say, oh, Ash is an extremist. And I probably am. But extremism and violence is sometimes the only way to shift the narrative.
To be clear, Asher was saying this to kind of justify the summer of 2020 riots, where legacy media established that you could be immune to catching COVID if you participated in nationwide riots for a BLM cause that they politically agree with, that ironically burned down a lot of black communities and a lot of black businesses. Now, getting back to the whole bad information argument, in this situation, the reason that bad information is so harmful is because it's my belief that, for the most part, people only have so many attempts at self-improvement before they become stressed out and give up.
If people say, well, you lack the willpower, I'm like, mate, it was not easy for me to get to where I was in medical school. It wasn't like it was a piece of cake. I do have willpower. I have the ability to stick at things. It's not worked, and I'm not unique. This is happening to everybody basically around the world. You've got to ask yourself, if it's really not working, And we've tried everything and it's not working. Why are we still doing it?
Ideally, you fail and fail and fail until you finally succeed. That tends to be how we get most of the cool stuff in society, like blue LED lights. I had no idea how difficult it was to invent the technology behind color-changing light bulbs and modern TVs until I watched this video. Scientists said that was impossible for decades, but one Japanese guy kept trying over and over and over again. However, if we're talking about large-scale changes or things that aren't people's life's work, people are going to get bitter and demotivated like Asher if they fail a lot because they're acting on bad information. So Asher's previous statement doesn't mean that you can't get people to be fit on a societal level. It just means that what's being done right now doesn't work. And it's not working because there are societal pressures that are designing these health movements to fail on purpose, or they're being used to secretly propagandize people into buying more ultra-processed food, or some company is fighting real reform on the junk food they feed kids in school because they would lose a lot of money. Or, on a less conspiratorial level, it's because societally, we haven't put an adequate amount of time and effort and research in determining if our weight loss strategies are effective, and it's very apparent that Asher herself hasn't done that in a lot of ways. So the way you actually get good information is to spend a lot of time learning new information by studying under multiple people and hearing different perspectives. It also helps to investigate the source material that they use for their ideas, as well as asking why things are the way they are. And the point is that if you keep learning new stuff and keep broadening your horizons, even if you start off with the worst and most inaccurate information, eventually you'll find the right path. And that's kind of the journey of acquiring knowledge or learning a skill. Great teachers are rare, so most of the time you're going to start off with less accurate or incomplete information, even if you don't have a teacher like Asher who is flooding you with nonsense. So it helps to keep an open mind and not bet everything on the first piece of information that you learned. Open-mindedness is very important for information accuracy because you have to be willing to admit that you're wrong if you find better knowledge, and kind of the big red flag on that with Asher Larmie is that she is a very racist person who, as a non-white person, spreads a ton of racist vitriol against white men, to the extent where she not only has probably discounted the opinions of a number of smart people because of their race, but also because the minute she opened her mouth on these topics, she likely lost the respect and aid of many smart colleagues, white or not, who could have taught her some useful things. Some of the best things that I've learned have been from friends who are smart, which means it's a very stupid idea for Asher Larmie to make an entire masterclass that basically teaches students to be incredibly standoffish with their doctors. So keep an open mind, listen to different perspectives, and deep dive into the information as much as you have time for. Anyway, thanks for watching, follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you in the next video.